Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Hey everybody, this is Emmett, and today my guest is Joseph Holmes. Now today we're going to talk about how life is really great for you and that you have backup. Let's just welcome Joseph. Hey Joseph, how you doing?
Hi, Emmett. I'm doing great. Nice to be here.
I was going through your writings, and if you could give me a backstory on how this all came about, and your writings are some messages or some conversations that you're having with a particular entity of love. That's the way I'm going to say it, because that's how I felt it when I was reading it.
Well, in about 1992, I was at a workshop, a one-week workshop, and we were doing some deep breathing exercises in the evening, and the lights were out, and I was lying on the floor, and above me I saw these pair of eyes, and that's all I saw were a pair of eyes. I thought they were my mother, who had passed away a couple of years earlier, and but just before the session ended, the eyes expanded, and it was Mother Mary. And she just blessed me, I don't know, for maybe 5 minutes or so, with gold and white beams of light. Now, when it was over, I didn't know what to think. Nothing like this had ever happened to me. And I assumed it was a blessing. And but several years later, there was another breathing workshop at Mission San Luis Rey in Oceanside, one of the 21 California missions. And I decided to take that workshop because I thought, well, it might be nice. Maybe I would meet up with Mother Mary again. And as I was closing my school, I had announced that there wouldn't be any classes on Saturday, because I'd be in this workshop. And so I was closing up, and one of the parents came up, and they asked me, they said, well, why are you taking the workshop? And without thinking them, what came out of my mouth was, to meet Mary Magdalene. So I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, Mary Magdalene, why did I say that? I have no interest in meeting her. I'm doing this to meet hopefully Mother Mary again. So anyway, I took the workshop, and the first morning they said, okay, we're going to do some breathing, and we're going to do it with the lights on and sitting in a chair. And my ego is saying, oh no, because I'm thinking it has to be the way it was the first time, right?
Yep.
And I'm thinking, oh no, this isn't going to work. There's no way I'm going to meet her. But I don't want to, disturb the class. So I get in the chair and we start some deep breathing. And through the door comes Mother Mary, and she has somebody with her. And they have these long black capes on. And now look, we don't have the syntax to describe these things, so I'm just gonna use.
Let me ask a question. So you said Mother Mary comes in a long black cape. This is physical, or is this your eyes closed and this is your experience?
Well, again, we don't have the syntax in our language to describe these things, but the best way I can describe it is that it was between physical and ghost form. Something in between. And as she came in, and she had someone with her, they both had these long black capes on, and they're just playing with me. They're swirling around my head and wrapping me in these black capes. And Emmett, the moment Mary said to me, I want you to lie on the floor, the facilitator said right afterwards, okay, everyone to the floor. And so we went to the floor, and my head was in Mary's lap, and Mary Magdalene, who was with her, hovered above me. And she came into my body, and she healed me of my childhood molestations. Now, up to that point, I was in my 40s. I had never spoken to anyone about these. And she healed me to a certain degree, not completely, but to a certain degree. And then the moment just before the facilitator said, okay, we're going to start coming out now, Mary said, okay, we're leaving. And they left. And, you would think, right? I would be thinking, wow, this was really cool. But my ego's thinking, God, they didn't even say goodbye, And the moment I thought that, Mary Magdalene put her head around the corner and just came up to my face. She held my face in the palms of her hands. She kissed me very lightly on the lips.
So you could feel these sensations, correct?
Yes, yes. And she smiled and she said, "You silly boy," and she left. well, she's just being playful, like she had been the whole morning. Well, from that time for the next several years, Mary Magdalene kind of stayed in touch with me, and then one morning in the December at 2 a.m. in the morning, she woke me up. And she said, I'm going to start sending you poems. And she said, I want to call you Joseph. Now, for about 2 months before this, Emmett, I live in the country and I take a walk in the mornings. And I always go through, I'm surrounded by a 100-acre monastery. I always go through what we call the farm. And every morning I would walk by this shed, and on a canister in the shed was written the name Joseph. That's my middle name. And I've never been called Joseph. I've always gone by my first name. So she says, I want to call you Joseph. And I say, and she asked me if that was okay. And I said, well, sure. And I said, but would you mind if I called you Maggie? And I said, I know Maggie's not a nickname for Magdalena, but I've always loved the name Maggie. Would it be okay if I called you Maggie? And she said, sure. So this is in December of 2013. And every from that point on, every morning, she'd wake me up, I'd come in, and I'd transcribe what we now call the love notes. They're 4 stanza poems. And in March, I started doubting all this. And what I want to convey to your listeners is most people, we have a plethora of information out there on how to be successful, right? I mean, it's just unending. But why aren't people using it? And I believe the reason people don't become successful or follow their dreams is because of fear and doubt.
I believe you're absolutely correct in the fact that fear is a great demotivator of aspirations.
Right, and that's the cousin of doubt. And so even with these experiences I've had with Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, in March of the following year, I started having doubt because that's what the ego's going to do to you. It's always going to try and control. So I was thinking, wow, come on, are these really coming from Mary Magdalene? People are going to think I'm crazy, And so one morning I just said to her, I said, I'd like concrete proof that these are really coming from you. And I don't want anything nebulous, like a hazy picture of a UFO, I want something concrete that's irrefutable. So a day went by and nothing happened, right? A week went by and nothing happened. A month went by and nothing happened. No signs. So I just kind of forgot about it, but the love notes kept coming through every morning. And then in July of that same year, Maggie says to me, I want you to start publishing these. So I'm thinking,
publish them. Okay. If I'm going to publish these, I better get some testimonials. And I didn't want to send them out to my friends, because they're just going to be nice. So I got onto this website where these thousands of people are on this website, and they just provide different services. And I wasn't about to read through everything, so I'm very visual, so I just started going through the pictures as quick as I could, and I just happened to see this picture of this one lady that caught my eye, so I stopped on it. Her name was Angelina, and she was living in Thailand. That's all I knew about her, and plus the service that she provided, which was some editing stuff. So I just contacted her. I said, look, I didn't tell her anything about Maggie or anything. I just said, I got some poems I'd like you to read. I'll pay you to read them, pay you for your time, but I'm not going to pay you for a testimonial. If you like them and feel moved by them and would like to give me a testimonial, I would appreciate it. But I'm just going to pay you for your time to look them over. So she wrote back and she said, no, I don't, that's not what I do. So you would think I would go on and find someone else, right? But for some reason, I stayed with her, and we went back and forth. And a few days later, she wrote back and she said, "Okay, send me some. I'll read them." So I sent a sampling of them, but with the sampling, I told her the story about Mary Magdalene and me calling her Maggie, she calling me Joseph. So the next day, Emmett, I get an email from her, and she goes, "Joseph, I have to tell you something. I love these love notes, but I have to tell you this. Everybody calls me Angelina today, but when I was growing up, everyone called me by my middle name, Magdalena, and I didn't know this. All I knew was that her name was Angelina." She said, everyone called me by my middle name, Magdalena, and my best friends called me Maggie. I said, well, now, wait a minute. Maggie's not a nickname for Magdalena, is it? Because I wanted to confirm that. She said, no, it's not. But somebody called me Maggie one day, and I liked it, and just my best friends called me Maggie. So I'm thinking, wow. This must be the angel that, I had asked for proof from Maggie. And then I remember it to this day, I looked back at her name, and her name's Angelina, Angel Ina. I thought, God. So about a month later, we kept going back, became better friends. About a month later, I guess she felt more comfortable with me. She wrote me, and she goes, Joseph, I got to tell you something else. Said, my name is Angelina because my father wanted to name me Angelina. My mother wanted to name me Mary. And on my birth certificate, my name is Mary Magdalena. And she said, and I know you're not going to believe this. So she sent me a copy of her passport to prove it to me. So here it is. Out of the thousands of people I could have picked, I landed on one person. She refused to read them in the beginning. I didn't go on. I stayed with her. And her name is Mary Magdalena, nicknamed Maggie. I mean, that's just... So what I want to... The reason I tell the story is because I asked for a burning bush, and she gave it to me. But she gave it to me in her time, because I was doubting.
Hey, let's backtrack with that too. When
Sure.
you say that, when you first asked the question, what was the time difference between when you made the request versus when the request came? What was that time difference?
I made the request in March of 2014, and the answer came in July of 2014. So March, April, May, June, July, about 4 months.
That's a good point and kind of a good lesson, because many people, we ask for things or we seek things out, and because of the time construct that humans live in, we want everything so right now. But a lot of times things come when they're necessary.
That's right. right? Is we have no real control over that. And but what I want to emphasize to your listeners is uh, doubt's always going to come up. It just doesn't matter. Ego always. And so people ask me, well, okay, how do you deal with your ego then? And my answer is you befriend it. You don't fight it. If you fight with your ego, you're going to lose.
So what do you mean
So
by fight with your ego? Because a lot of times when the ego comes up, what we tend to do is suppress it.
that's right. So that suppressing it is fighting it, right? And so what you do is you just befriend it. So in other words, uh, even to this day, uh, doubt will come in at times. And whenever doubt comes in, or if I'm doing a project or something, uh, I thank ego. I say thank you for reminding me to drop back into my heart. So when I'm working from my heart, I'm choosing love. When I'm working from ego, most of the time you're choosing fear. So in other words, we make decisions every day, and we only have two choices. We can make the decision based on fear, or we can make it based on love. Most people make their decisions based on fear. That's because they're in their head. They're thinking about what happened in the past, what can happen in the future, instead of dropping into the heart. So instead of beating yourself up, oh God, I just can't get ahead because ego, no. Every time ego voices itself, you just thank you for reminding me to drop into my heart
So what
and
about
make decisions based on love.
so what about when the ego comes up and it's that ego, that dominance, that ego that says me, 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 me?
Well, you have to keep befriending it, and you have to keep saying thank you for reminding me to drop into my heart.
So
So if it's continually coming up, you're not in your heart. You're continually staying in your head. So in the beginning, it might take a lot, but after a while, you start. For example, we all wake up in the morning, and most of us are in our head, right? We're thinking about what happened yesterday, or what's going to happen at the office today, or whatever. And what I do when I wake up is, I start breathing because I'm usually in my head when I wake up. I start breathing and I say, thank you for reminding me to drop into my heart. Now, the other thing I do during the day is Rod Stewart has a beautiful song out called Rhythm of My Heart. And you can find it on YouTube. And I listen to that once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times a day sometimes. Because it's the rhythm of my heart, it's a beautiful song, and it reminds me to stay in my heart. Now, here's another thing that happened about a year ago. I was starting to have doubt, and so Maggie, out of the blue, Maggie says, I want you to look up the meaning of Migdalia. I think, Migdalia? Well, in 1968, my first year of college, I didn't have any friends. And this one woman from across the border, she would come across with her girlfriends and go to college here in San Diego. And for some reason, she took a liking to me, but she looked, I was an anthropology major. She looked like an Aztec princess. I mean, she was just beautiful. And so I've never really forgotten her. But she was also a very sweet, very kind person. And she would always look for me in our breaks and come over and spend time with me. And the Vietnam War was going on, and they started drafting college students. So I decided to enlist. And the last time I saw her, I was walking across the parking lot, and she was in the car with her 5 friends. She was in the back seat on the right, and I didn't know her girlfriends, but I guess they knew me because her girlfriend saw me and she whispered something to Migdalia. Migdalia turned completely around with this great big grin on her face, just waving to me. And that's the last time I saw her. I never I never made contact with her again. And then I went into the Army and went to Vietnam. The whole year I was in Vietnam. When I got to Vietnam, everybody knows you're new, right? And so I had to go to Saigon to wait for my paperwork. And all the Vietnamese would ask me, well, where are you stationed at? I said, well, I'm going to be in Pleiku. And I swear, every single one of them would say, oh, no, that's the worst place you can go. And I'm thinking, well, thanks a lot, but that's where I'm going because it's just swarming with Viet Cong. Well, I get to Pleiku, and my job was, highly classified. We would intercept the messages coming from Hanoi, the capital of North Vietnam, and their armies in the south. And we would intercept these and give them to our guys. And we had antennas all over the place. They knew what we were doing. But for the whole year I was there, from May 1969 to May 70, we were never hit. And we worked in trailers, so if we were ever overrun, the trailers were on trucks. We could be moving out of there, and we'd be inside the trailers, destroying everything. So we never knew if we were going to get overrun or anything. But for the whole year I was there, nothing. And in May of 1970, I left country. I went down to Saigon and wait for my paperwork. I got word when I was in Saigon that the trailer I worked in took a direct hit, and 3 of my friends that I worked side by side with were killed. Now, last year, Maggie says, look up, when I'm doubting, she says, look up the meaning of Migdalia, the woman that I last saw smiling, waving at me. So I look it up, and it says flower. So I'm thinking, okay, she was like a flower, right? So the next day, Maggie says, look it up again. I said, but I looked it up. It means flower. She said, look it up again. Use a different source. So I looked it up using a different dictionary. And it says Migdalia, derivative of Magdalena. And I'm telling you, looking, Steve, if you've heard that commencement speech by Steve Jobs, in there he says, at the time you can't connect the dots, but later on you look back and all the dots connect. And Migdalia, I'm convinced that Migdalia, that Maggie, through Migdalia, when she was smiling and waving to me, was telling me I was going to be okay in Vietnam.
When you were in Vietnam, a lot of times there were a lot of people came back very much scarred because they were young men, and a lot of drugs were introduced into their life. And for instance, heroin was a big thing back then.
Right.
And a lot of people came back hooked on. Do you think, did you get involved with anything like that, or did you just have this sense of calm when you were there? Because
I never got into drugs. I just had this sense of protection.
I've had that in my life too. During some adverse times, you just know you're feeling horrible.
Right.
You feel absolutely horrible, but it's going to be all right. Adverse times when you feel like I'm just in this rut, but it's temporary. Yeah, that's the best way I want to say it. When you are receiving these, let me ask you the process. Is it like someone speaking to you and then you just dictate like physically on paper, word for word, or is it a feeling that you interpret and then reinterpret for the public?
Well, it's like, again, we don't have the syntax to explain it, but I sit down. It's 2 or 3 in the morning, and I come in and I sit down at my writing desk in front of a yellow pad and with a pen in my hand, and then it just comes to me. It just flows through me. It's not a voice. I don't hear a voice. It's just the words just flow through, and that's all. That's the best I can explain it. And then, um, when I publish these in book form, I have the love note, but then I always put a commentary next to it to explain the poem.
Yeah, I saw that.
Um, Now that is the same. I sit there in front of a yellow pad and I wait, and so it's uh, like you know it comes from her too. Uh, uh, but I don't hear it. It just flows through me. So it's not automatic writing. I'm not really familiar with automatic writing, but from what I understand, it's not automatic writing. It's just I call it transcribing.
Got you.
Even though I don't hear her. Um,
Kind of like a stenographer where they're just in the
right,
environment
right,
and they're just autonomously putting
right,
things down.
right. But what I want to emphasize to your listeners is doubt. The ego is always going to create doubt in your life, no matter what kind of, I mean, look at the things I've seen, and yet I still get doubt. Uh, I'm not getting the doubt. It's my ego that's getting the doubt. And so I just, when it happens, I just say thank you, and I drop back into my heart, and that's where I try and live, is in my heart. Um, and when I say listen to your angel, now some people say, well, that's nice. You can see and you can hear your angels, but what about me? I can't. Well, and I addressed that, in the Loving Your Wealth series. It's a 6-volume series. After the second volume, I actually addressed that to Maggie, and I said, well, and it's not like I have to address it to her; she already knows, right? but I bring it up, and she says, okay. So in the third volume, in the introduction, she had me write that anybody that comes across these love notes in any form. So if they're in the library and they come across them, if they're in the bookstore and they just come across the title, they don't even pick the book up and look at it. Or if, people can go on my website and sign up for free love notes that come out once a week. Whichever way, she says, if when somebody reads or comes into contact with these love notes in whatever way, that is me. You can tell them that is me, quote unquote, adopting them. So I am their angels. So in other words, if somebody's walking through the bookstore and they see the book, says Love Notes for Your Soul, for example, they don't even have to pick it up. They just notice it. Maggie is their angel.
So what about, how do I want to phrase this? Angels are present for everyone, correct?
Yes.
And maybe there's some angels attached to particular individuals.
Uh-huh.
And how can people access those angels? How can they get quiet enough to access that information?
Well, your angels are your intuition. People call it intuition, have called it intuition because they didn't know what else to call it, right? But your intuition is your angels talking to you. That's all it is. So the key is to trust your intuition and take action on it. Because if you wait, and I'm sure you know, Emmett, if you get an intuitive hit and you wait too long, the ego talks you out of it. Right? The ego will make a case, a very solid sounding case of why you shouldn't do that. All right? So that's the key, is you listen to your intuition. Now, the intuition can come in various forms. You can be driving down the freeway and see a sign. You can be watching a movie and hear something said, you know, or you can be meditating and a thought comes to you, you know, but you have to act on it. You have to have the faith to act on it quickly, or ego will talk you out of it every time.
Since you've written the book, are you out speaking? Are you doing workshops?
Yes, so I do. I speak. I do workshops. I have a person in Italy now who's translating some of my work, and they want to bring me over to Italy, start doing. Well, that's right. Here's how that happened. About 2 years ago, I'm at Barnes and Noble, and I'm looking at the calendars, right? These pictorial calendars, and I see one on Italy. So my intuition, my angel, right, Maggie, tells me to take it home. So I bought it, brought it home, and has, every month has these pictures of different places in Italy. And then Maggie says, she tells me, you're going to be moving to Italy for 2 years, and you're going to be using Italy as your base to do workshops in Europe. Okay. So, I kind of, that's another thing. When I get these, I kind of detach from them. I set the intention and I detach. And so that was 2 years ago, right? So about 6 months ago, Mother Mary says to me, she says, I'm going to start taking a more active role now. She's kind of been in the background, right?
Yeah.
Maggie, right? And so I thought, well, okay, all right. And then about 2 months later, this woman in Italy contacts me, and she's Italian parents, born in Italy, but she grew up in the UK. So she's fluent in both English and Italian, and she's currently living in Italy. She has an English school in Italy, and she wants to translate some of my books, and her name is Rose Marie. And I didn't think anything about it. I thought Rosemary, right? Translation's Rosemary.
Yeah.
And she says, just out of the blue, I didn't ask her anything. She says, you know what my name means? I said, it means Rosemary. She says, no. She says, Rosemary, if you translate it from the Italian, means the Rosary of Saint Mary. Now, this is 2 months after Mary tells me she's going to start taking a more active role. I mean,
these things keep coming in 2 month cycles, huh?
I guess so. I don't know. But, and I think we're all, this is available to all of us, but I have a pretty open mind. I've always had a pretty open mind. So maybe I'm just, but Maggie told me to buy that calendar. I bought it. I put it on my wall. I was looking at it every day, and then things open up. So
and you're also into the martial arts as well, correct?
Yes.
And with the martial arts, because I used to take a form of martial arts when I was younger. Mm-hmm. You have to be into your breathing.
Right.
There's a mind-body connection.
Right.
So has this opened it up? Has this helped you to hit your trinity with your mind, body, and spirit together?
Well, yeah, I think the reason I was attracted to the martial arts was because of the Zen aspect of it, was the philosophy of it. And I was first introduced to Taekwondo in Vietnam, and just for a very brief period of time. And so from Vietnam, here's another story. uh, when you're getting ready to leave country, they ask you where you'd like to go, and you have three choices. Uh, and the clerk asked me before he gave me the paperwork. He said, "Well, where do you want to go?" I said, "Panama," and he laughed at me. He said, "Are you nuts? That's the best duty station in the world. Nobody gets that." He said, "But put down your three choices." So I put Panama, Panama, Panama. Well, they gave it to me. And I end up in Panama, and I start taking Shotokan, which is a Japanese form of, I get my yellow belt in Shotokan, right? But then they closed Panama down. They sent me to Thailand. And that's where really I had a Korean teacher, and we worked out 7 days a week, 3 to 5 hours a day. I mean,
But it's a totally different discipline than
yeah,
it is
yeah,
taught in America.
yeah, every day. And I got my first degree black belt there, but it was all physical, and it was all kata. Never taught you how to fight, how to defend yourself. And so I came back to San Diego, and I thought, well, while I was in Thailand, I read James Michener's Iberia, the huge volume about Spain. I thought, and I was an anthropology student, so I thought, I live near Mexico. I can always go to Mexico. I'm going to go to Spain. So I got out of the army, and I went to Spain, and I asked people where, what they asked me. I was in Barcelona. And said, why did you come to Spain? I said, well, I came for Semana Santa, the Holy Week, right? I wanted to see how they celebrated it. And so everyone said, well, if you want to see Semana Santa, you got to go to Granada on the other end of the country, right? And so I hitchhiked to Granada, and I lived there for 4 months. But the first person I ran into and befriended was a Japanese fellow named Hiroki, who was a black belt in Shotokan karate. And so we would put demonstrations on to help charities and things around Granada, martial arts workshops. And he said, you really ought to go to Japan and train. I said, Hiroki, how am I going to get to Japan? So anyway, eventually I left. I came back to San Diego. I enrolled at State, but I thought, well, maybe if I do go to Japan, I don't know anybody there, so maybe I should make some Japanese friends. So I looked through the yellow pages, right? In those days, the yellow page, and I looked for a school with a Japanese instructor who was from Japan. So it was about 45-minute drive from my house. So I visited, I signed up, and I didn't tell him I wanted to go to Japan. That I just never told anybody that. But excuse me, I'm the kind of person that, just as a way of being grateful, I would get to the dojo before anybody else did. I would clean it up, make sure it was ready for classes. I would take every class, as many classes as I could every day in the evening, and help teach classes. And then I would be the last one to leave. That's just the way I was, right? I never asked for anything. That's just was my way of thanking the instructor for allowing me to take all the classes and help teach and stuff. Well, about a year later, the Grand Master comes over from Japan. Yeah, he tests me for first degree black belt in his style, and he says, "I'll give it to you on one condition." I'm thinking, oh God, I have to fight him, right? And he says, I says, okay, what is it? He says, I'll pass you if you come to Japan and train. Now, I never said anything to anybody. I said, well, I really can't, I'm a student. I really can't afford that. He says, we'll pay for everything.
So that's basically your law of attraction, where
That's
you
right.
you set it, and you're patient enough to let it happen.
Right. I detach from it. You set the intention and then detach from it. And so I did. I went and I trained, and
You-
I mean that, and but I got very discouraged even after all that training. And it was beautiful training. I mean, you see people in the United States.
Uh-huh.
You go to Japan. I lived with the All Japan champion of that year, and I trained with the best in the world, and there is no comparison. There's no comparison. But anyway, it was all physical, and so I eventually got discouraged. And once my grandmaster died, you either have to. It all becomes political after that. And so you either have to take sides with one person or the other, or you start your own organization.
So it's kind of like family.
Yeah. So I started my own organization, and that's where I really got into teaching the Zen aspects, the philosophy.
So you have a studio now?
No, I just closed it a year and a half ago. But I taught my students how to defend themselves. But I also taught the philosophy of it too. So I kind of combined the two.
I noticed one thing about your reviews, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of women are your following.
Yes. The reason that is, and Maggie made this very clear to me, the hope of the world lies in the hands of feminine energy.
I can understand that because men will tear everything up.
That's right.
As
That's
we've
right.
seen, we've been in my lifetime. I can't
Right.
remember a time when there was not a war.
Right.
Actually, yes, I can. From about 75 to about 80.
Yes, but there were wars in other places, like the genocide in Rwanda and things like that. But no, not wars that we were, directly involved in.
But you're absolutely correct. When
Right.
it's pretty bizarre that you say that, because I was thinking this myself. I was thinking about all the maladies of society, particularly in America, and how the fact that, we could cure all these things. We
Sure
could
we
cure
can.
healthcare,
Sure.
education, because if you look at the sheer dollars they spent on supporting war efforts,
Hmm.
you could wipe out the debts of all the college students. You could
Oh,
have
yeah.
health
Sure.
care, and I mean real health care, not medical care. You could
That's
have,
right, real healthcare. The healthcare our representatives get.
yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I told my daughter that. She was like, "What should I do, Daddy?" I was like, "Run for Congress." I was like, "What?" Because you got about 2 to 4 years. You do some work, and you're pretty much set after that.
Right, right. But but yeah, you're right. Most, and that's because of the feminine energy. In fact, the volume 1 of the Loving Yourself Wealthy series, the subtitle is, it talks about feminine energy. And that's why gays and lesbians are so important, because of the men, gay men, of males in general, gay men, and I'm not gay, but gay men have that feminine energy, and are not afraid to give it to the world. And now I have that very feminine energy too, and I think many men who are not gay but are focused in their hearts, they have that same energy.
Do you think that's I remember this song when I was a kid by the Fifth Dimension, The Dawning of Aquarius. And I never got that song until recently when I started looking at kind of the scientific, the astrological, and basically we're going into the sign of Aquarius. If you look way out from the universe, look at ours. And they said we're changing from a time of very masculine dominant energy to a very feminine energy. But I think right now, and I kind of see it because you see, historically women have been kind of put under, and we've been living in patriarchal societies.
Right.
And now you're starting to see where women are being assertive. And I tell young women, especially those who say I'm feminist, and I say, okay, when did you get their right to vote?
Right.
And most of them are clueless. I'm just
right.
being honest about people I speak to when I say that. But we are seeing how women are coming to the forefront, and they're starting to control things. Like I've had interviews with people, 1 in 5 businesses is female owned. And if you would have went back 40 years ago, that would have been unheard of.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying about, where that is the key, because historically we've seen with men involved, we are going to come in, take over and dominate whatever we can. And then we don't care about what's left in our wake.
Right. Well, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
I have another question for you.
Sure.
I can kind of guess about how old you are, but if you were to right now, the person that you are right now, if you were to, your doorbell was to ring, and you open the door, and your 25 or 30-year-old you was there, and he just looked at you like, what would you tell him?
Well, I would tell him to, every decision you make it from love and not fear. That's simple.
Yeah, that was really simple. I was expecting more.
Well, because if you do that, everything else is taken care of.
I've been finding that out lately because I've had some challenges with people, and my immediate intuition is to fight. And I said, and I take a very deep breath, and then I go, and then what comes out is something very nice and wholesome.
Yes.
And their reaction is kind of, wow. You can see them disarm.
Right. Well, that's exactly what happened to me in the martial arts. When I got my first black belt in Taekwondo, it was all physical, and they would just teach me to stand there. If somebody's attacking you, just stand there and block it, right? And well, okay, in Vietnam and Thailand, I'm 5'8", right? About the same size as everyone else. Okay, that can work. Well, when I came back to the States, here I am, a first-degree black belt, right? And I'd square off with a white belt, a beginner who's 6 feet tall, 250 pounds. I'd get run over. And I got so discouraged, I almost quit. I almost quit the martial arts. But then when I went to Japan, again, I was everybody's size, right? They taught me the move. And so if somebody, before, if somebody attacked me, I just stand there and try and block it. Well, they just taught me to move. And I would move, if you can visualize a center line and somebody's coming straight at you, I would just move northwest. So I would end up behind the person. Never touch them. Just end up behind them. And that was brought home when I came back to this after training in Japan. I came back to San Diego. I was maybe the first week I was back, so there were students there that didn't know me, and there was this big big black belt from a Taekwondo school, and he was there. He didn't know me, but he was big, over 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, maybe more. And he just looked at me with disdain because he saw I was a black belt, but, you're so small, what can you do? Well, he wanted, after class, he wanted to spar with me. So, yeah, okay. So he had this kick. He would just leap at you. He'd leap in the air and he'd throw this. He'd take his leg and bring it hook it behind your head, and kick you in the back of the head. That's what he would do with the other students. And so we squared off, and he came in with that technique, and I went northeast. And as he passed me, I just tapped him with an open hand on the back of his head. And I swear, when he landed, he didn't know where I was. He looked around, and he turned around, and he saw I was behind him. So we'd start again. He did the same technique. I did the same technique. So that's the only technique he knew. But it was so devastating. It just destroyed people, right? But that's because people would just stand there and try and, And so, I don't know, we did that a few times, and he just got frustrated and he left. Well, that was a Friday, because the next morning, it was a Saturday morning, we had an 8 o'clock class, and here he comes. And the first thing he wants to do is he wants to spar with me before class even started. So everybody was watching, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm figuring, well, okay, I don't know what he's going to do, right? But he's probably thinking I'm going to go northeast. So here he comes with the same technique, right? So I just dropped to the floor. I hooked his standing leg, and then I kicked him in the groin, but I didn't kick him. I stopped about an inch in front of his groin.
So you swept it.
I didn't sweep him.
You were like a sweeping move.
I could have swept him if I wanted, and I could have kicked him in the groin if I wanted, but I didn't. I just dropped, and I just showed him what I could do to him. But I didn't want to touch him. I didn't want to hurt him. And you could hear the gasp in the room, just when I dropped to the floor, and everyone thought I was going to kick him in the groin, but I stopped about an inch.
So you were basically showing him it's easier to go with the river than to fight against the river.
And then you don't have to hurt anybody to beat somebody. And we never saw him again.
Hey,
he never returned to the dojo because his ego was fighting my heart. And instead of battling with him, my ego against his ego, I just went off center line. I just allowed him to go by me. And he knew every time that I could have devastated him if I wanted to, but I chose not to. See, when people start learning the martial arts, anybody can hit anybody. That doesn't take a lot of skill or a lot of training, but it takes a lot of skill to control your anger, or, not even have it to begin with, and to stop your punch or your kick an inch in front of the target. That takes skill. That's the art. That's the art. Anybody can hit anybody, but it takes skill to stop an inch in front of your target, or a half inch, or an eighth of an inch. I'll never forget that. That was brought home to me when I first got to Japan, and I was living with the All Japan champion. He wasn't a champion yet, and that was my first tournament, and his name was Kunio, and these guys are so good. When Kunio won the championship, the other guy nicked him in the face. And Kunio was crying, and he was angry, after winning the All Japan Championship. I said, Cuneo, well, you just won the championship. What are you upset about? He says, well, the guy nicked me. In other words, Cuneo had to get off center line. And he came in and won the match with a reverse punch, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you think of the timing that took, just the incredible timing it took. In other words, for him to win that match, the guy was punching straight at his face. He had to move into the punch. If he had moved back, the guy would have won the match. He had to move into that punch. Move into it. The punch was coming straight at him. He had to move into it, and then.
So basically,
at the exact time, he had to move off center line so it didn't hit him and get the point. If you think about the incredible timing that took, and the guy his timing was just slightly off, that the guy nicked him, but Cuneo got the winning punch in.
And that was his focus, that he was like, I can't believe that happened.
That's just it's just incredible timing. But the point being is that he had to move off center line. He had to concede in order to win. If that makes sense to you. He had to concede to win.
I'm listening
to that yin yang, the soft and the hard, right?
Yeah.
The guy came in with a hard punch, and he had to use the softness of going off center line.
Yeah, I'm listening to what you're saying, and you're giving in your words, you're giving subtle lessons,
right,
about everything that your books are probably saying.
Exactly, right.
Particularly about love, and sometimes you have to go with something versus oppose it instead of to actually reach the goal that you want.
It's like Mother Teresa had said, right? She said, I'll never attend an anti-war rally, but invite me to a peace rally and I'll be there. Well, the unaware person will think, well, that's the same thing. No, it's not.
Yeah, that's a hard concept to grasp for many people, because I first came into contact with that when I was introduced to an Abraham Hicks seminar online. A friend of mine gave it to me, and it was something very similar to what you're talking about. And they were saying, how can I not smoke cigarettes? Or something similar to that, but they gave such a different take on it, and it's just like, do something else. Don't think about that. Think about the solution.
Right. Don't be against something. Be for something.
Yes, be for something to get your outcome. That's what I wanted to say.
Right. Because when you're against something, there's resistance, and source, God, love cannot flow through you when there's resistance.
Is that the reason we still have this war on drugs, but we have more drugs than ever?
Yeah, it's a war on drugs. I mean, it's insane. You got people in jail for 30 years because of marijuana. And you let people off for raping somebody for, this last kid, right? This, 2 months in jail? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, but that's absolutely true, too, because there are people who have had a couple of joints in their car, and they're serving some serious time.
Yeah, it's nonsense, But, you have people like Richard Branson, who's really, advocating the overhaul of war on drugs. And President Obama has released a lot of offenders, commuted their sentences because it's crazy. I mean, somebody's got marijuana, you want to put them in jail for 30 years? I mean, geez.
So what do you think we will be in 30 years?
Well, I think um, I think with the likes of Bill Gates and the legacy of Steve Jobs and President Obama and uh, Richard Branson, and these people are going to take us to an elevated. I hate to say elevated, because it's not like that, but take us to a more aware consciousness, uh, where a lot of these things like poverty and injustices uh, are disappearing.
Well, what
But
do you think about with the advent of President-elect Donald Trump and the fact that he has actually brought the opposite and promotes the
well,
opposite energy
well,
that
it's always been there, but that's just the last gasp of the Confederacy. If you look at the states he won the Confederacy. Plus that middle America. Look, he lost the election by 3 million votes.
yeah,
He did not.
popular. Yeah.
He did not win the election. He lost it by 3 million votes. He was selected as president on a technicality called the Electoral College. That's how he became president. He certainly doesn't have a mandate. He lost the election by 3 million votes. There is no mandate for his policies. There's no mandate for the obstructionists. I don't care if the Republicans are different. I don't vote party. I vote for the person.
Hmm.
But there's certainly no mandate. He got in on a technicality. It's the last gasp of the Confederacy. It's the last gasp of Jim Crow. We thought George Wallace standing, blocking the entrance to the University of Alabama was the last gasp. But look at this. It wasn't. This is the last gasp, and so be it. It's gonna. They're gonna go kicking and screaming. But I believe, Emmett, there's a new rainbow wall forming now. This election should not have been lost. The Democrats have to own that, and they have to learn from it. And not just the Democrats, but you have people like what's his name from Kentucky, the Libertarian, siding with the Democrats now. So there's a new rainbow wall that's forming, especially with the attorney generals across different states, and they know now this new wall is going to be impenetrable. What happened with this election is not going to happen again. People have learned their lesson.
I believe that because a lot of people complain about millennials, but there's one thing about millennials that I observe because I have a daughter that's 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They the ones that are kind of settled in where they're or know their direction. A lot of the old ideologies are dying, and they're dying fast.
Yep.
Because they're not really, they're looking to where they fit in, and it might not necessarily be with their biological family, but they will make their own family. They will make their own communities, and they kind of look at it like, this is what I want. I don't need a lot of this. I don't need the fanciest car. I don't need the biggest house. So if you look at the tiny house movement, that's a big millennial thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at, saving energy and the big push for marijuana, and my daughter said this one time, she was like, Daddy, I've seen a lot of drunk people and they're horrible. Yeah. She's
right.
like, and I've seen quite a few people who have been high on marijuana and they're really nice.
Right. I mean, it's just, but that's a phase we're moving. And remember, you don't have to change the world. I mean, I'm sure you don't have to change everybody. You only have to get to the critical point. It's like the macaque monkeys in Japan, where they did that study where a group. These monkeys were isolated, no contact between islands, but when one group, one island, started cleaning their sweet potatoes in the water, in the seawater, that was transmitted over to the other colony or group of monkeys on the isolated, had no contact, but it was transmitted.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
It's called the 100th monkey. So we don't have to change everybody. The awareness only has to be in that critical mass number, whatever that's going to be, and then the whole earth will shift.
You know, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point.
Right. The tipping point, right.
And that's all that we're waiting for certain ideologies, and particularly in peace and love and harmony, is to find that tipping point.
Right. So it's, that, and that's the hope that we all share, is that, we're not going to change everybody. We don't have to. We only have to hit the tipping point, and then the consciousness shifts.
Hey, how many books have you written? Because I see that you have Loving Yourself Wealthy, and I've seen up to volume 5. I've also seen Love Notes for Your Soul.
So I have 8 books. I should say we, because it's Maggie too. We have 8 books published, and I have 11 written. So I have 11 written and 12 written now. So I have 4 more that I need to get published. I've just been writing, transcribing.
Do you publish them yourself?
Yes, I publish them through Amazon.
Okay. They're all Kindle books, or do you have?
No. The first four volumes of the Loving Yourself Wealthy are in paperback as well. So the most popular volume is the Power of Angels. Is volume 3. If people go to my website, which is lovenotesforyoursoul.com, they can see them all listed there, and they can get paperback or a digital copy on volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the rest are all digital right now. But they're being turned into paperback form. Just it takes time, and but if anybody wants a personally inscribed signed copy of any of my paperback books, just write to me directly, joseph@loveyourselfwealthy.com, and then we'll work it out, and I'll actually send them, because that has to come from me. So I actually have the book that I can inscribe to them. If they order it just from Amazon, for example, I never see it. It just goes out of Amazon, and I can't sign it or anything. So
what has been the response to your books? So, and I'm asking you from the point when you did the first one, and then were you spurred to do subsequent, saying, "Hey, this is the medium"?
The response at first, when I first published the first volume, I really thought I was going to get some criticism on the Mary Magdalene story, but I've never received criticism on that. In fact, I've never received any criticism. I've always had positive feedback, and what people mention mostly about is the fact that I have come out publicly and discussed in a very open way about my molestations as a child. Because, they say 1 out of 3 people have been molested, 1 out of 3 girls have been molested. But I think it's probably higher than that. 1 out of 4 boys, I'm sure, is higher than that. And people, they contact me and they just thank me because they've been molested, and it took me 40 years before I even told anybody. you know. And so I'm getting a lot of good feedback on that. People really appreciate the fact that I've come out on that and discussed it openly and freely, and but recently now, um, I've really been talking about this volume 3, The Power of Angels, and we've got close to the last interview I did. We've got on Blog Talk Radio, we got close to 100 comments on it, all positive, all about people relating to the angel stories. People have these angel stories that they don't tell anybody about because they think people are going to not believe them or think they're crazy. And now when they hear my stories, they feel comfortable at least sharing them with me, in private messages. But I think Maggie's told me now that because they're people close to me have said, well, should you even say that these are from Mary Magdalene? And Maggie's made it very clear to me. These are from her, and like she said, anybody who comes across them, she basically adopts. She's their angel, and whether they can feel her or not, she's their angel. And I had one person contact me and say that's very comforting to know, and it is, because a lot of people just, for whatever reason, they can't tune into their angels. But look, it took me 40 years to tune in the mind, So again, you're going to tune in when the angels. Well, the first time I met Mary Magdalene, I didn't know who it was. I was taken into these light regions. People talk about the white light, right? Well, I was taken into these light regions, and that made the white light look like kindergarten stuff. And I saw this light in the distance, and the guide that was with me stopped and said, "You can't go there." I said, "Well, why not? I want to." He says, "No, you'll combust. You'll spontaneously burn up if you go there." I didn't know what it was at the time, but later Maggie told me that was her. That was the light of Mary Magdalene in that form. And when she came to me at the Mission San Luis Rey, she had to change her vibration. She had to, I don't like to say lower, but she had to change the vibration so I could see her as Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
And I could relate with her without burning up. You see, so they come in different forms.
So have you had inklings of any other entity as well? Or contact, should I say?
No, when I went into those light regions, and I'm really hesitant to say this because, people want to tell, "Oh, you're just saying that because, but because you asked me, I will say that the guide who was with me going into those light regions was Christ. That's the only contact I've ever had with him that I know of. And I haven't had contact with him since. And why he was my guide, I don't know. It's never been explained to me.
So what do you think about organized religion on this planet? Because because I've seen a lot of things where organized religion, I've seen as much harm that organized patriarchal religion has done. As well as the opposite.
It's all look. If you take the Catholic Church, for example, I'm second generation Irish American Catholic. My grandparents came over here from Ireland. And my mother grew up in the St. Mary's Church in Oakland, California. So when I was raised, she wasn't a devout Catholic, but We went to Catholic church at times. I love Catholic churches. I love to be in them, the old ones, right? And I love the saints. But if you look at the saints, they weren't part of the organized church. They were off doing their own thing, right? and when you come into the organization of the church, for example, just the if you saw a spotlight, that's just touched the tip of the iceberg. What has gone on? I mean, they're digging up archaeological digs on old churches, right? And they're finding the bones of fetuses, hundreds of them. Well, what was going on between the priests and the nuns? And
oh yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
Oh yeah, and and just the fact that whoever it was, the head guy in Boston, he's now living protected in the Vatican. I mean, that tells you right there. Anita Moorjani has a great book out called Dying to Be Me. And, she had stage 4 cancer and died and then had a out-of-body experience and came back, a near-death experience and came back. And somebody asked her, well, how do you stay in that? How do you stay in that state of awareness now that you're back in your body and healed from the cancer? And she says, well, she says you have to suspend all dogma and doctrine. Because if you don't suspend dogma and doctrine, you'll never move into that space. What Paulo Coelho calls the Aleph. Because you can't do it. Because the dogma and doctrine is all based in fear. It's all ego-based.
Yeah.
I mean, please tell me, why cannot women be priests? Why not?
And I've always wondered that
right?
because in my lifetime, I'm just going to use my lifetime, women are the most consistent source of unconditional love.
That's right.
On earth. I use that when I wrote in my book, when I'm trying to convey how to love. And I said, love like a mother loves a child, which is unconditional. Mm-hmm. A child can go burn down the neighborhood. The mother's going to say, she's going to chastise you, but she's going to let you know, I love you.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm going to defend you, even though I know it was wrong, and I'm going to talk to you about it being wrong, but I still love you. And one thing that it's rarely conveyed in that sense about love when you think about a mother from a child, because she's really loving herself. It's from herself that child was born.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unconditional love. It's agape, but yeah, dogma and doctrine just, it all comes from ego, all comes from fear. And
Joseph, I have to tell you, we've gone 3 times longer than I normally do a podcast.
Well, it was.
So
if somebody hears it and it helps them, it's. Maybe you can edit out the political stuff and.
It's still going to be a little bit, but how can people reach you? So give them your website, your email address.
Sure, thank you. It's website is lovenotesforyoursoul.com. My direct email is joseph@loveyourselfwealthy.com. And so if you go to my website, you can see my Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff there. If they want and they can order all my books off my website, which goes directly into Amazon, or if they want a personally inscribed, autographed copy of any of my books, just write me directly at joseph@loveyourselfwealthy.com. And
you'll make that happen.
And I'll make that happen.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an awesome day with Joseph Holmes. And remember, you can love yourself wealthy, and there's love notes for everybody's soul. Till next time,
Right.
keep living the billionaire lifestyle. Thanks, Joseph, for being on
Thanks,
the show.
Emmett. It's a pleasure. Thank you.